In 1910, the British Royal Navy was the undisputed ruler of the oceans, and the HMS Dreadnought was the jewel in its crown. It was the most terrifying, heavily armored, and technologically advanced battleship on the planet. It completely revolutionized naval warfare overnight and served as the ultimate symbol of British imperial power. Naturally, getting on board this top secret floating fortress would require the highest level of military security clearance. Or, as it turns out, it just required a forged telegram, a fake mustache, and a completely made up language. This is the true story of how a handful of eccentric bohemian artists walked right past the world's most secure military blockade, completely humiliated the British Empire, and left the entire Navy screaming a phrase they would bitterly regret for decades. Welcome to Exhibit Absurd. Our story begins with Horace de Vere Cole. Born into an immensely wealthy Anglo-Irish family, Cole was a poet, an intellectual, and, without a doubt, one of the greatest professional trolls in human history. Cole didn't just like pulling pranks. He treated them like high-stakes performance art. He once handed out free theater tickets to a group of bald men, arranging their seats so precisely that when viewed from the upper balcony, their shiny heads spelled out a curse word. But in early 1910, Cole decided he wanted to pull off his ultimate masterpiece. He wanted to see just how far the British elite would bend to their own rigid rules of etiquette. To pull this off, he enlisted the help of his friends from the infamous Bloomsbury Group, a collective of free-thinking writers and artists in London. Among his recruits was a brilliant 28-year-old writer named Virginia Stephen, a woman you might know better today as the legendary author Virginia Woolf. To understand why a handful of artists could fool the greatest military force on Earth, you have to understand the sheer, paralyzing obsession the British government had with their own reputation. The 1910s were the peak of the intense Anglo-German naval arms race. The British were terrified of falling behind the German Empire in military technology. Because they were so desperate to project global dominance, they became completely blind to anything that looked like a diplomatic opportunity. The military brass wasn't looking for spies. They were looking to be flattered by foreign dignitaries. The Navy wanted to show off the Dreadnought to the rest of the world so badly that if someone showed up claiming to be royalty, they didn't check their passports. They just checked to make sure their own brass buttons were polished. Cole knew that British arrogance was their ultimate vulnerability. Cole's plan was beautifully simple. They would pretend to be a royal delegation from Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, visiting England on an official state tour. Cole sent a forged telegram to the Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, Admiral Sir William May. Signed by the Foreign Office, the telegram demanded a full red carpet tour of the Dreadnought for the Abyssinian princess. The Navy took the bait immediately, but the pranksters had a massive logistical hurdle. They were a bunch of pale, upper-class British intellectuals. To solve this, they headed to Willie Clarkson, the most famous theatrical costumier in London. They applied dark stage makeup, glued on massive, bushy fake beards using spirit gum, put on elaborate turbans, and draped themselves in heavy, exotic robes. Virginia Woolf herself was heavily disguised as a bearded male prince. By modern standards, the disguises were highly offensive and completely cartoonish. But Cole banked on one brilliant realization. The British military brass was so incredibly sheltered and ignorant of actual African culture, they wouldn't have the slightest clue what real Abyssinian royalty looked like. On February 10th, the Royals arrived at the Weymouth railway station. The Navy didn't just buy the disguise. They went all out. The pranksters were greeted by a full military guard of honor, a naval brass band, and the admiral himself. Cole introduced himself as the official Foreign Office interpreter. But the group faced an immediate problem. None of them spoke a single word of Amharic, the actual language of Ethiopia. Their solution? They just spoke to each other in a frantic, scrambled mix of mispronounced Latin and Greek. Every time the admiral proudly showed off a massive 12-inch gun or a piece of advanced radar equipment, the fake royals would throw their hands in the air, look amazed, and shout a completely made-up phrase, "Bunga bunga." The British officers nodded solemnly, assuming it was a profound cultural expression of awe. The Navy was so eager to please that they offered the royals a lavish state banquet. But Cole panicked. He knew that if his friends tried to chew food, their cheap fake beards would literally fall right into their soup. Cole quickly intervened, claiming the prince's sacred religious customs strictly forbade them from eating food prepared by outsiders. The Royal Navy respectfully apologized to them for the inconvenience. The group completed the tour, accepted the salutes, boarded a train back to London, and wiped off their makeup. They had gotten away scot-free. But a prank is completely pointless if the victim never finds out they've been fooled. A few days later, Cole proudly marched into the offices of the Daily Mirror newspaper, handed them the group photograph, and leaked the entire story. When the news broke, the British public erupted into absolute hysterics. The media fallout was brutal. For the Navy, this wasn't just a loss of face. It was a total, catastrophic breakdown of military authority. The most powerful fighting force on the planet had just been compromised by a woman in a faked beard and a guy shouting gibberish. For the next several months, the phrase "bunga bunga" became the most dangerous weapon in London. It was shouted at naval parades, scrolled on walls near military barracks, and even sung by children in the streets whenever a sailor walked by. The prank had exposed the British elites as the one thing they feared most: completely, utterly ridiculous. The military was absolutely furious. The Admiralty aggressively demanded that Cole and his friends be arrested, thrown in prison, and tried for high treason. But when the government's top lawyers actually looked at the case, they hit a hilarious legal brick wall. Cole and his friends hadn't stolen any state secrets. They hadn't damaged a single piece of government property. They hadn't committed espionage or breached any actual military codes. Technically speaking, the only actual law they broke was sending a forged telegram under a false name, a minor postal offense that carried a laughably small fine and certainly didn't warrant a massive public treason trial. Realizing that a highly publicized courtroom battle would only give the pranksters more attention and make the Navy look even more incompetent, the government was forced to quietly drop the entire issue. No one was ever charged with a crime. The Dreadnought hoax went down as one of the greatest embarrassments in military history. Horace de Vere Cole and Virginia Woolf proved that the ultimate weapon against the strict, arrogant rules of the British Empire wasn't military might, it was a healthy dose of absolute absurdity. If you want to keep exploring the most chaotic, bizarre, and hilarious archives of legal history, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time on Exhibit Absurd.